What's up, everyone? I've been enjoying this coverage of... there's not a good way to say, because enjoy isn't quite the right word for a war, but I've been indulging in the coverage. Yeah, I do find it interesting. Mostly the argumentation of it, as opposed to what's actually happening on the ground. I mean, they're both interesting, but... I don't know, I stand with Israel for a number of reasons, but one ancillary reason that adds to it is because it seems like everyone who stands against Israel is a spurg or stupid in some way or another for various reasons. You know, like the Jihad Squad, AOC and her group of just cringy social justice leftists. So you have, your social justice leftists, your Muslim activists like CARE that, are outraged about the number of Arabs dying in Israel, living under Jewish domination, so-called Jewish domination, but, aren't complaining about many of the Muslim regimes that are actually much worse for a lot of the Arabs. And their view of Israel is it's a colonial settler project. It's similar to the colonial regimes, or settler regimes, maybe even like the Pilgrims or something like this. And then, of course, you have and I don't think that's the best way to look at it, which I'll explain further. And then you have, the Israel tards that think Israel is responsible for everything from 9/11 to deliberately attacking USS Liberty to running the Federal Reserve to being responsible for ethnic replacement of white people by orchestrating this mass migration of Arabs to London, Paris, Berlin, etc., etc. So I like the fact that Israel and what Israel does, and just its existence alone, pisses off all of these cringy people that I find to be obnoxious and annoying. It sort of separates the wheat from the chaff as far as people that have a myopic view of the world versus people that can read a complex history, and it is a very complex history. So I don't begrudge people that are on the wrong side or are wrong about the situation, because I believe I myself used to be wrong about it until I read more about it, and I still might even be wrong in one way or another, although I don't believe I would change my core position based on what I know now. But looking at Israel as a oppressor, settler, colonial type of power I just think it's extremely myopic and is not looking at the big picture and how everything unfolded. Because I think the proper way to view Israel and the Zionist movement is a national liberation movement. Its opponent actually being Arab Islamic colonialism and domination. Because this isn't a conflict that's simply confined to the territory of Palestine. It was 7 countries that invaded Israel, Palestine, after the Jews declared their independence. So people that are looking at it as the Jews dominating the Palestinians are leaving that part out. And, they view the Palestinians as a distinct people, which they've kind of become, but really they were an extension of the Arab world and pan-Arabism. So, the Jews, the Zionists, stood up to this Islamic domination in an extremely small area about the size of New Jersey. Well, that area would be larger now with settlements and such. But I think they've taken on the PLO narrative or the Hamas narrative that it's the Jews that are colonists and dominating the Arabs. When it didn't start out that way. I mean, the original Yishuv, the Jewish community, bought all their property. It wasn't violent for the most part. I mean, they didn't acquire the land by violence. They acquired the land by purchasing it. And there were outbreaks of violence on both sides, but the Arabs rose up on many separate occasions and tried to kick the Jews out of towns, destroy their property, etc. And just had no tolerance for a Jewish state of any size. Now, I could understand they might think that Israel was going to be an expansionist power, and many did have the idea that they were going to control all of Palestine, but it didn't have to be that way. They could have settled it peacefully by talking, but the Arab powers had no interest in allowing Jewish sovereignty in a state of any size. So how can you negotiate with that? It's either live under domination, willingly live under domination, or fight us. Obviously they chose to fight. So but it pisses off all the right people. You know, like people. I thought Trump was the biggest wedge issue ever. He was like the most triggering thing ever. But actually, I think it might be Israel, because Trump is temporary, right? Israel is ongoing. It doesn't get talked about too much when there's not a war, but when there's a war, the whole world goes apeshit. It's crazy. But Israel is a good litmus test for me, because I respect people more when they are Israel supporters, or at least neutral, or understand the context of what's going on. Which is, if there was a country that, or a power, or anybody that launched thousands of missiles at one of our cities, we would go fucking Okinawa on their fucking ass. They wouldn't exist anymore. Look what we did to after 9/11. How many countries did we invade? Using that as a pretext, for better or worse. So I think Israel is, they're more similar to us than the Palestinians or the other Arab powers. You know, can't the Jews have this one fucking little piece of land? And what's the huge problem? Yeah, I don't know. That's all my thoughts right now.